back to our NUIC YouTube channel. We're pleased to bring it back to you. It's been a year or two since we've really been able to put together some videos on a weekly basis, and we wanted to bring it back for you, the fans. We keep seeing all these different comments on when are you going to bring back the YouTube videos. I missed watching those in class, even though when you're in class you should be paying attention what you're doing in school, but we understand. I mean, football's awesome, and we really appreciate the fact that you guys want to hear and see what we have to say and what we think as far as how teams look and play out as the course of the season goes by. One of the things that we're going to bring back this year are our weekly videos where we preview games, we do recaps of the week before, and we go through and we do our predictions on those games on a week-to-week basis up to and including the state championship finals for 8-man in Monmouth and for 11-man in Champaign. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about 8-man football as we have our North 2 division as the 8-man football went into 5 segregated divisions. And the North 2 is where the primary of our NUIC teams sit, with Polo, Amboy, Aquin, River Ridge, Milledgeville, and Orangeville. Obviously, there's a lot of good depth. You take a look and recap what happened in the playoffs last year. Polo was your state champion with a 12-7 win over Orangeville in a very low-scoring affair in Monmouth last year. Obviously, Polo finished the season with a 13-0 record to Orangeville's 11-2 record. Other teams that we're definitely on watch for this year is West Central, who lost to Polo in the semifinals. Milford Cisna Park, who lost to Polo as well in the quarterfinals in a 62-52 shootout. We have our teams here, Amboy, that lost to Orangeville in the semis. You have Martinsville, who lost in the quarterfinals to Orangeville. Milledgeville losing to Amboy, and then some other teams that we're definitely looking at, like St. Thomas More, Flanagan, Cornell Woodland, Decatur Lutheran, Aquin, and Hiawatha. And of course, there's other teams that are coming in the mix. You got Cambridge, Ridgewood coming into the 8-man fold this year, so it'll be interesting to see what things they can do to turn around what they had for a season a year ago. They joined the 8-man game, and it'll be interesting to see. They've had a tradition of playoff success at the 11-man level. How can they transform that into the 8-man game now? And we'll see where that goes and how it all plays out. But we're going to start off with our 8-man coverage. We're going to break down each team, what they have coming back, what to look forward to as the season goes on, and we're going to start that right now. First team we're going to talk about are the defending state champion, the Polo Marcos. Obviously, they come into 2022 as the 2-time defending state champions, as we did not have a state championship season during the COVID season. So they are the official back-to-back champions, winning in 2019 and again in 2021. They went 13-0 a year ago. This year, they need to replace a lot as far as the linemen are concerned. They do return both of their key running backs in Avery Grenoble and Brock Soto. Both of those guys combined to rush for over 3,000 yards, each eclipsing 1,500 yards apiece. But they're going to have to replace their quarterback, Tyler Murdian, and hopefully they will be looking at what they have going on there. It's a very good idea that they probably will go with Carter Murdian, which is Tyler's younger brother. But they do return Caden Webster, who is all-state at defensive end. He's also going to be on the line, helping them out there. Brady Wolber returns. And then some newcomers that Coach Alston's really looking forward to are offensive linemen Waylon Harris, Alex Albano, and then you have tight end Rylan Lindas and Nathan Yingling joining as well to get more playing time and really help move the Marcos forward. I believe that Polo will be the number one ranked team when they start the season. Um, we'll review what our NUICfootball.com rankings are here at the end of this episode, but I feel that Polo will garner the votes across the I8FA Association when they bring out and release those state rankings here in a couple weeks. It's hard to say because Polo, obviously, being the two-time defending state champions, they don't have a whole lot of losses in the eight-man game since they've transitioned over. And with what they have coming back, it's going to be a very tough team to stop. A lot of people have their eyes on Polo, and rightfully so. They've been able to really get things moving in the right direction despite the losses that they've had. And Coach Alston's even stated that they've had a very good summer. So overall, the Marcos are very excited with what they have coming back, as they should be. It's very hard to replace high caliber players like Grenoble and Soto, but they have them back. And so they're not replacing, they're basically trying to build pieces around them to make them even more efficient and effective for the 2022 season. Expect Polo will be towards the top. Right now, I have them predicted to go 9-0 in the regular season, and then we'll see what happens when they get to the playoffs. The next team we're going to talk about are the Amboy Clippers. 2021, they went 5-4. Had a little bit of a rough go early on in the season. They had losses to Polo. They lost to Milledgeville. And they had a few other games too where they just didn't get around everything. Let's see. Yeah, they lost to Milledgeville in week 2, 24-12. Lost to Polo 36-28 in week 3. Then they lost a very close game to Milford Cisna Park in week 5. And then later on in week 7, they were beat pretty good by Orangeville 55-6. But they were able to rebound that. Once they hit the playoffs, they took off running. They got paired up with Aquin in the first round, who they did not play in the regular season, but they were able to beat Aquin to move on into that second round, their quarterfinal game with Milledgeville, where they were able to upset Milledgeville. Week 2, they lost to Milledgeville 24-12. They turned that around into a 28-18 win to move into the semifinals, where they met up with Orangeville for the second time, and they lost that game, unfortunately. But they have some good players coming back. You take a look at All-Stater Tucker Lindemeyer returning at QB and defensive back. Obviously, he led the team in rushing from his quarterback position. He threw for another 16 touchdowns on top of rushing for 12 touchdowns, so they're able to get one of those playmakers back. Kai Cook is returning as well at the running back position. And then you have All-State wide receiver Brennan Blaine coming back, who caught 692 yards for 12 touchdowns just a season ago. And he'll also be coming back at defensive end, where he was able to anchor that D-line for the Clippers. Leading tackler Levi McKinley is back as well. He should be forced to be reckoned with on the defensive side at linebacker. And then you're going to add in the play of Quinn Luffelman, who we heard about quite a bit last season, but Coach Payne has him listed as somewhat of a newcomer because he was kind of more of a spot player last year. This year he's definitely going to solidify himself in the starting role, both at running back and defensive end. Troy Anderson's going to be adding to that receiver mix with Brennan Blaine at the wide receiver and defensive back spot. You have Landon Welker coming back at linebacker. And then on the offensive line, you're going to have some guys to look at in Landon Montavon and Trey Payne. So obviously there's a lot of hype around Amboy getting into the playoffs at 5-4 and then going on a run like they did, especially against the NUIC teams that they beat in both Aquin and Milledgeville before they met up with Orangeville. So you take a look at their route in the playoffs, and arguably they had probably the toughest route in the playoffs because between Aquin, Milledgeville, and Orangeville, all three of those teams at one point or another throughout the course of the regular season had been ranked in the top 5 in state. And they were able to get Aquin, then they upset Milledgeville, and then met their demise to Orangeville in the quarters, coming up a game short of that state championship game. So there's a lot of hype around what the Clippers have coming back this year. Coach Payne's definitely excited with what they have coming up. And rightfully so. I mean, with who they have returning, especially with Lindenmeyer and Blaine and Cook all returning in key critical positions. You have your leading tackler back in Levi McKinley. It comes down to the offensive line. Where can they get that offensive line play at and make sure that they're getting that going in the right direction? And it feels like Coach Payne has the right people listed in that spot with Montavon and Payne to lead the charge there. Overall, I think Amboy is going to have a breakout year. I think they're going to build off of last year's playoff success. Right now, I have them finishing the regular season at 8-1. All right, the next team is going to be the Aquin Bulldogs. Obviously, Aquin comes in reeling off of a first-round loss after going 6-3 in the regular season. Then they meet up with Amboy in the first round of the playoffs, where they were the heavy favorites in that game, but they end up losing that game 52-28. They lose a lot of key players that have moved on due to graduation. And they lost their head coach in Brock Cooter, who has left to go to Oregon High School. So Bill Shepard is the new head coach for the Bulldogs, and he's definitely going to be not new to the area of football. This is his first time coaching in 8-man football, but he's got a long history of football coaching under his belt. He's been coaching in the area for over 30 years. Has had some ups and downs throughout the course of his career, but he's definitely excited with the opportunity he has here at Aquin. And they're going to be led by their quarterback, Aiden Wolf. Last year, Wolf was one of the top passers in the area, thrown for over 1,900 yards. Obviously, he lost all of his wide receivers. So he's going to have to count on some new upcoming receivers in Hunter Buss and Cooper Hathaway. Both those guys earned some playing time a season ago, but they're going to have to step into bigger roles as we move into the 2022 season. Some other guys that will also be looked upon in that receiver position would be Reed Pearson, who's going to be asked to play receiver and defensive back. And you got some other guys like Braden Jackson and Brant Carlson that will be sophomores coming in that are going to need to pick up some big minutes and fill in some big roles there. On the line, you got Jackson Eggy back. You mix that in with Mason McIntyre and Abbott Thurman. They look to have somewhat of a sound line. Most of these guys received a lot of playing time a season ago, especially with the injury to Cade Geiken. They needed somebody to step up and fill that role. Mason McIntyre and Abbott Thurman did that. And then with the return of Jackson Eggy, it helps out everything that the Bulldogs have going forward there. Um, and then you got another sophomore that's going to be asked to make big contributions, and that's going to be Austin Hilby. Overall, I think that the Bulldogs are going to have somewhat of some struggles. I mean, they have in quarterback Aiden Wolf a very good player that can get the field or get the ball downfield. Um, and what they lose out though is in the running back game. Um, they got some big shoes to fill there, and in conversing with Coach Shepard, it sounds like that he is going to want to air the ball out, which would definitely play to the strengths that Aquin has. It's nothing unseen before with Aquin, as we've predominantly seen them as a passing team. They've had years where they've been able to mix it up and become a running team, but over the years they've liked to chuck the ball downfield, use that spread offense to establish a run game per se. Uh, but they got a lot of capabilities that they can play around, but it'll be interesting to see how they can piece it all together. And of course, having a change of coaching staff puts a little added pressure in there because you have to be able to get the buy-in from the players to accept what the new regime brings forward. So it'll be interesting to see where Aquin goes. I know that preseason-wise, a lot of people are really talking about the Bulldogs, and across the state, in the 8-man game, people are still um, looking at them as being one of the top 10 teams in the state, and they very well may start there to begin the season, but we'll see how it goes. Right now, I have them finishing at 4-5 on the year, so if they're gonna make some noise, they're gonna have to pick up some places. They have some tough games on their schedule with Cambridge coming. They have West Central on their schedule. Obviously, games with Amboy and Polo, Orangeville and Milledgeville, and so they have a pretty good schedule there, loaded up, ready to go, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. All right, River Ridge. Wildcats went 3-6 just a season ago after coming off the COVID season where they were 6-0. And you ask anybody around, and they feel that River Ridge was lost out on a state championship possibility as their 2020 COVID season. They had a pretty loaded team there, but they come back this year. Last year going 3-6. They have some good athletic players that they're excited for that they can build around. One of their biggest keys is definitely going to be their offensive and defensive line play, as they're pretty sound fundamentally in the skill set players, but they need that line to be able to create the space and room in order to get their offense working. Likewise on defense, to set the tone at the line of scrimmage so that they can attack the gaps accordingly to defend their opponents as well. At quarterback, you're going to see Sam Reese. He got a little bit of playing time last year, but this year he's going to step into that starting role. At wide receiver, you're going to see Jack Kettleson and Trayton McGovern. Running backs, you're going to see three different guys pretty much take control of this running offense with George Winter, Seth Nicholas, and LeBron Ransom. And one of the things I've seen River Ridge do over the years since transitioning to 8-man is they like to run the football more. They want to add a little bit of power, similar to what Polo does. They'll spread it out a little bit if they need to, hit you on a quick slant, but they want to be able to get off tackle and run. And with this kind of backfield that they have, they're definitely geared for the running game, controlling the clock, controlling the tempo, and they just have to make those plays happen. Obviously, with Kettleson and McGovern at wide receiver, you got some playmakers that Reese can hit. with some quick passes and make some big plays happen there. On that offensive and defensive line, Coach Nicholas is going to be looking at the players of Brian Appleby, Ben Richmond, and Ethan Gonzalez to really step up and take that line play to the next level where they need to be in order to find success in the 2022 season. It'll be interesting to see what they can do. Obviously, they have a pretty tough schedule as they open up with South Beloit and Amboy right out of the chutes, both teams that are expected to be in the state rankings or talked about in the state rankings to start the season. Later down the road in week 4, you have Aquin, and then you finish off the final 3 weeks with a pretty good gauntlet of Polo, Milledgeville, and Orangeville. So, looking ahead, the deck's kind of stacked against them as far as their schedule's concerned, but they have opportunities with a few games in there where they can definitely make some noise and maybe twist a game or two in their favor. And 5-4, possibly 6-3 is not so far out of play for them, but they definitely have to make a lot of strides on that offensive and defensive line in order to open up the play of those playmakers for them to find success. Our prediction for River Ridge is to match the record from just a season ago. We have them finishing at 3-6. Next team we're going to talk about is the Milledgeville Missiles. Obviously, Milledgeville came in last year with a 8-1 record as they hit the playoffs. One of the things that we talked about highly about them was their ability to transition to the 8-man game very well. Up through the regular season, their only loss was to Polo, their rival, and that was in week 1 in a pretty closely contested game as well. But they got to the playoffs, and I remember on our playoff show we were talking about how good Milledgeville was, and a lot of that really stemmed from how well they handled Orangeville, giving Orangeville their only loss at the time, and the way that they were able to just man up with the Broncos and then take it to them offensively. And then just their overall level of play through the second half of the season. I mean, they just started to take teams and tear them apart. And it was amazing watching them play, especially with the quarterback play of Connor Nye. And of course, he was a sophomore a season ago. He returns this year. He obviously led the team in passing, but he also led the team in rushing. And he had a lot of touchdowns for Milledgeville that he was responsible for. And such an electric player. I mean, if you had to put him in 8-man player of the year talks, he definitely would have been in that conversation last year. But they finished 9-2 as they were able to take care of business in the first round, but they met up with Amboy in the second round in a second matchup of the season. Earlier in that year, they had beat Amboy 24-12 in the second week, but it just didn't work out for them in the quarterfinals as they lost 28-18. They got down pretty big early. I think they were down 18-0. They started to battle back, but it just wasn't enough. A little too late, as they say. But they lose a lot of playmakers. I think Coach Roble said they lost 13 seniors, so that's a lot of players to replace. But they do return Connor Nye. They return Bryce Audie, who actually led our area in 8-man and wide receiver with 709 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. They returned Kason Johnson, who actually got injured towards the end of last season. He'll be back. And then they have Eric Ebersol returning to anchor both the offensive and defensive line for the Missiles. Outside of that, they do have a lot of pieces that they need to patch back together. They still do have a lot of excitement for what they have coming up and what they're building on. The playmaking skills that they have should be able to do them well, especially in the 8-man game, provided that they can just fill a couple spots here and there and get good play both offensively and defensively. One of the things that was really great about their defense last year was how fast they were. It wasn't so much about the size because they didn't have a lot of size, but they had a lot of speed, and that team speed was able to cut people down right away, and they were able to make plays um, and stymie a lot of offenses for the most part, and it allowed them to take advantage on the offensive side of the ball as well, where they could put up a lot of points in a hurry with the package that they had. Really high on Milledgeville still this year. I feel that once again, you're definitely going to see them in that state ranking top 5. Is probably a very good possibility. But they got to be able to come ready to play, and they got to make noise happen. We have them going. What was it? 7-2, I think, on the year is where we had it at. Let me see here. Let's pull it up real fast. Yes, 6-3. We have them going 6-3. They have some good games there right out of the chute with Orangeville, Aquin, Amboy Polo, another team that we're interested in with Decatur Lutheran. That's their first 5 weeks. Then you jump to week 7, they have West Central, who we're very high on. And then they finish out week 9 with St. Thomas More, another team that we expect to see in the state rankings. So Milledgeville's got quite the schedule ahead of them. And some of those games they get to go on the road, which would be Decatur. They get to travel down there to play Decatur Lutheran. They have West Central coming to Milledgeville along with St. Thomas More, so that'll help out there. But quite the schedule that the Missiles have in order to get back to where they are expected to be. So 6-3 is where we have the Missiles going for 2022. All right, our last team that we're going to talk about are the Orangeville Broncos. Just a season ago, they finished as the state runner-up with that 12-7 loss to Polo in the state championship game. And boy, what a game that was. One of the big things that Orangeville has coming into this year is they lost their all-state running back and linebacker Gunnar Lobdell, who has transferred to Lena Winslow for his senior year, wanted to get back into playing 11-man football. They're also going to be replacing their head coach, Bill Meyer, who has resigned. And they're bringing back Jay Doyle. Jay Doyle had been the head coach of the Orangeville Broncos from 2012 to 2019. Last year he was on staff as an assistant. He's going to retake control of the program again in 2022. So in that essence, you're pretty much staying status quo, business as usual to say. But they do have a lot of pieces that they need to replace, and what they're looking to build around is the move of Gavin Roth to fullback. They have Blake Folgate returning as running back. They have another newcomer in Mason Pfeiffer, who's going to be put at running back. Cody Worth is going to come back out for football. He's going to take over at the quarterback position. Another top newcomer that Coach Doyle's really excited about. On the offensive and defensive lines, he's expecting to be able to lean on Ben Briggs and Nathan Brinkmeyer to help lead the charge there. And then you got Kyle Klepping as a player that is coming back and to fill in the wide receiver and defensive back role. So, there again, Coach Doyle's optimistic about what he has to work with. He's got, 6 good players that he's ready to work around. He knows that he needs to develop a couple more in order to have the success that they had. But you take a look at what they have coming up on their schedule, and they got quite a bit of a gauntlet to come out the first 5 weeks with Milledgeville, Polo, Aquin, Hiawatha, and Amboy to start. And then it kind of quiets down there in the last half of the season. So they're going to have to be able to steal a couple games early on in that first 5 game gauntlet to see some success and make it to the playoffs. The cool thing about 8-man football is you don't necessarily have to be 5-4. Usually you're going to get in the playoffs at 4-5. Coming from this conference, the North 2 division, I think a 4-5 team is going to bode very well, especially with the seeding that 8-man uses, where they just seed it straight up 1 through 16. It plays well when you are able to go out of the area and play teams you haven't seen. And I think it just brings a better level of competition. You see a better playoff progression. Games are close. You got true state championship games, as we saw last year with Polo and Orangeville playing in that 12-7 win, or 12-7 game. And then, you just see more games there, just better competition overall as the playoffs keep progressing week to week. But this year, right now, I'm looking at Orangeville to go 6-3 and get back to the playoffs. All right, so taking a look at some of the games, obviously we were able to cover some of them, but a couple of the teams that we didn't mention have some big games too. Some of the big games that we're looking at right out of the gates, week 1, Polo and Amboy in Polo is definitely a game that you're going to want to be at if you're an 8-man follower, and especially in the area of Northwest Illinois. That's going to be a good game there, or should be anyway, as there's a lot of hype and anticipation around both of these teams being state championship caliber type teams. Week 2, the Marcos then have Orangeville, and then they play St. Thomas More. So first 3 games right out of the gates, actually first 4 games, are going to be against 4 teams that will probably be state ranked or considered for state ranking nominations, and then it kind of slows down until later in the second half of the season when week 8 they host Flanagan Cornell Woodland. That's another team that we have looking at, and then week 5 they have to travel to Hiawatha. Hiawatha was 4-5 just a season ago, but they were a junior dominated team. So Hiawatha is one of those teams that a lot of teams are going to want to watch out for, because 4-5 a season ago, a lot of juniors coming back as seniors this year. They're going to be a formidable team that has some experience under their belt, and that can become very dangerous when you have that situation there. Amboy, obviously we've already highlighted that game with Polo. Week 3, they play Milledgeville. Week 4, they're going to play host to Milford Cisna Park. Week 5, they have to travel to Orangeville. Week 6, they also get a meet-up with Hiawatha. And then in week 9, they play host to West Central. So we talked about West Central. They lost in the semifinals last year to Polo. West Central is definitely going to be another team that returns some key players, most notably in quarterback Mason Carnes and running back Caden Drosty. Very explosive players there. It'll be interesting to see how everything transpires, what they can build around those 2 guys to get them back to the caliber that we saw them at just a season ago. Milledgeville is going to open up with Orangeville. That game will be in Orangeville. Then they follow that up with Amboy in week 3, Polo in week 4. Week 5 is a game where we just talked about when we were reviewing the Missiles. They travel down to Decatur to play Decatur Lutheran. Then in week 7 they play host to West Central. In week 9 they play host to St. Thomas More. So as we stated in their little preview, the Missiles definitely have a very heavy, loaded schedule, and they're going to have to go to battle week to week. I mean, we say that all the time, when especially coming up here from the NUIC, but in 8-man football, it's a little bit different because the level of parity is a lot more broad, and but Milledgeville's got a lot of tough games that they have ahead of them. Obviously, uh, Aquin will be interesting to see what they do. Like we said, new coach, lost a lot of talent, have a great quarterback coming back, but need to build a lot of pieces around his game skills in order for them to be successful. But they start off with Milledgeville in week 2, Orangeville week 3. They have Cambridge, Ridgewood in week 5, which we're interested to see what they do. This is their first year in 8-man. They have to go down to Biggsville to play West Central in week 6. And then they finish with Amboy and Polo in weeks 8 and 9. So there again, Aquin's got a very heavy schedule. And what's interesting with the pairings of putting everybody into these new divisions, you have the contingent of the NUIC teams all in one division. They're all going to have to play each other this year. So it's a really cool aspect to see. And then, taking a look at another big game for one of our teams is River Ridge. They got South Beloit in week 1. While it may not be a marquee game that I would say you got to get to, for the Wildcats, that's one of their big games. If they can get that game, one win against South Beloit, it could help turn the tide of the season in their favor, as they also have some tough games with Aquin, Orangeville, and then you still have the gauntlet of Amboy, Polo, and Milledgeville in there that they're going to have to compete against too. So they're going to have to steal a couple here and there. And that week 1 game with South Beloit, if they can take that and make that game in their favor for a W, we could be talking about River Ridge getting back into the playoffs and potentially making some noise once they get there. Overall, we released our state rankings this past weekend as well. I was able to get my panel of voters together, and they were prompt and on time with all their votes. So I appreciate that. So Greg, Mitch, Colin, and Matt, appreciate your help on that. But I will recap what we have for those votes. Coming at number 1 is the Polo Marcos. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if the IFA does not have them ranked number 1 when they start, but at least in our NUICfootball.com rankings, Polo will start the season at number 1. At number 2 is a tie with Amboy and West Central. That puts Milledgeville at number 4. Number 5, we have Milford-Cisna Park. Then we have another tie at number 6 between St. Thomas More and Orangeville. Those two did play in the regular season just a season ago, and Orangeville was able to squeak one out against St. Thomas More down in Champaign in week 2. Both of them having to replace some big shoes in their lineups, so it'll be interesting to see how they both transition here. Number 8 is Aquin. Number 9 is Martinsville, and coming in at number 10 is Flanagan, Cornell, Woodland. And then others receiving votes were South Beloit, Decatur, Lutheran, and Pawnee. So that gives you a look at what 8-man has for the 2022 season as far as the NUIC. We've talked about some of the teams that we're looking out for: Milford-Cisna Park, West Central, St. Thomas More, Flanagan, Cornell, Woodland, Decatur, Lutheran, even Pawnee. I did not mention Pawnee, but Pawnee would definitely be a team that you want to keep an eye on. Martinsville had a pretty good season a year ago. Not sure, can't remember all what they return. I remember watching them play in Orangeville in the quarterfinals last year, and there was some pieces that they could work on, but I can't remember all what they have returning. Um, Obviously, we have them in our state rankings coming at number 9, so you know we should see some things materialize there. But overall, feel pretty confident with what our state rankings have brought as far as teams to watch. Um, we'll get those posted on our website as well at nuicfootball.com this week, and we're excited to see these games kick off. Obviously, as discussed in the 8-man ranks for the NUIC teams, a lot of big games week to week to week as they play each other more often. And then some of their non-divisional games are against some of the top opponents that they're going to see in across the 8-man landscape in the playoffs there. So stay tuned. Always pay attention to what we got going on. Like I said, we're bringing a lot of things back that you're used to seeing. We want to get everything brought back up to the level we were at a couple years ago. As always, root for the NUIC.